Welcome to the Provider's Report, where we delve into the world of value-based healthcare. Our mission is to empower healthcare providers with the knowledge and tools they need to deliver exceptional patient care. Each episode, we explore best practices, innovative strategies, and real-world examples of how to achieve the highest standards in patient communication and outcomes. Join us as we transform the future of healthcare, one conversation at a time.
Okay, first up, we have Enneagram 1. As an Enneagram 1 myself, this was so much fun to record. Talking with Sam Scott, a current chiropractic student and also a pharmacy tech, it really made me realize how much you can have in common, yet be so different from someone of the same Enneagram type. He's a type 1 wing 9, and I am a type 1 wing 2, so you'll get to see a little bit of how similarities and differences kind of came to play here. Whether you're a type 1 like us or one of the other types, just by listening to this episode, you'll get a pretty good sense of this personality type in general, what motivates us in practice, and how we can use these strengths for good with our patients while focusing on the areas where maybe we fall short sometimes. Another thing to keep in mind is maybe you don't even know what your type is. So this is going to be a great episode where we dive into this specific type. If something here resonates with you, or maybe you're thinking, hey, that sounds a whole lot like me, dive in a little bit deeper. Check out at Enneagram Ashton on Instagram, or read up on the Enneagram Institute online and see if you might be an Enneagram 1 yourself. Hey everybody, we are here today with Sam, and he is a student at Palmer College of Chiropractic in Davenport. And this is the very, very beginning of our Enneagram series. And I'm just so excited because obviously we're going to start with number 1. Sam is a number 1. I'm a number 1. So this episode is going to get probably pretty raw and realistic. So welcome, Sam. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks. It's great being here.
Absolutely. So go ahead and start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing here.
Yeah. So as she said, my name is Sam Scott. I'm in my 3rd year currently at Palmer College of Chiropractic in Davenport, Iowa. For those of you kind of not knowing where Iowa's at, it's sort of middle of the U.S. and we're right on the Mississippi River. Originally, I'm from the Ohio area, the Northeast Ohio area, and my wife, who we just got married a couple of weeks ago now, she's from the Pittsburgh area. So we had met in undergrad, then I came out here for chiropractic school. I come from a large family of 7. I'm the youngest of them, and we're all married now. So that's kind of been a nice thing for my mom. But yeah, it's none of my family members are in the medical field. So I was the first one to step into that. I was most interested in sort of the musculoskeletal side of things. That's why I lean more towards chiropractic. But yeah, that's pretty much me. Not too much to say right now because I'm still pretty young, but I'm excited to see where this podcast goes and how I can be useful to it.
Absolutely. Well, as you know, and some of our listeners, Enneagram 1 is it's a beautiful 50-50 kind of personality type because you have all of these characteristics that are very analytical, attention to detail, very organized and meticulous, perfectionist kind of lifestyle. So that's why I kind of giggled when you said you were one of 7, and then you're the only one to go into healthcare. Because as you and I talked about earlier, I think the type 1 Enneagram is amazing in healthcare. I think it's super beneficial. It's probably a really good thing as a student as well. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's in some ways it makes you kind of that much more studious and disciplined in your studies. But I think at the same time, you are then more prone to overworking yourself and staying late and coming in early. So it can contribute a little bit to a bit of burnout if you're not careful. But yeah, no, I would agree.
Definitely. And it's funny you mentioned burnout because when it comes to healthcare and the Enneagram personality test, surprisingly, there's not a lot of research out there. The Enneagram test is so great, but that's one flaw is it just doesn't have a lot of research in general. But the very little bit that exists on the internet when it comes to healthcare, it's all about burnout, physician burnout. And obviously that's a huge problem within healthcare, but I would be willing to put some money down that the type 1 Enneagrams probably suffer from that the most just because of the nature of the beast. But I have to know, because there's 7 people in your family, do you think any other one of your siblings is also a type 1?
My sister, who's closest in age to me,
Okay.
she would be the one that I would think is most like me. We were both very involved academically all through
Okay.
elementary, middle, into high school, and then into college. My other brothers and sisters, they definitely fall more on the creative side of
Uh-huh.
things. One's a web designer, the other's a graphic designer, the other one does a ton of stuff with weddings and wedding planning.
Very cool.
So there may be more of that prototypical right wing or right brain personality versus more of the analytical.
Oh, definitely. So obviously, all these characteristics when it comes to Enneagram One, I'll just read off a very quick list here for our listeners. It's amazing, but they all kind of embody the same kind of mindset. Obviously, we're known as the reformer. So there's a lot of moving parts. We tend to always want to do the right thing. We're generally very honest. We have pretty high levels of integrity, the constant need to be right. We're generally very reliable. We're always looking for fairness. We want everything done the right way, whether we're the ones doing it or somebody else. We tend to be very detail oriented, efficient, good at teaching others. Out of all these kinds of things, you as a student, you as a future healthcare provider, what characteristics and personality items that we just talked about, what really embody who you are the most?
The structured rational side definitely encompasses a large foundation of sort of who I am. Anyone who knows me and knows me well, they know that I have a schedule, a morning routine that I pretty much do religiously, whether it's raining outside, it's a beautiful day, whether it's snowing, like it was -30 here the other day with the wind chill in Iowa. So it was absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, anyone who knows me will tell you that I have a plan and I'll stick to it. And if that plan seems to align with the goals or the values that I have, then come hell or high water, I'm going to get it. And I'm going to get that plan sort of into fruition. But on the other side of the one core personality, the idealistic expectation and sort of lenses that ones can occupy certainly embodies myself as well. Because when I look out into the world, I tend to see the more idealistic forms of people. I think the best in people, and I anticipate that our actions will be altruistic. And if I give them, then they'll give back to me in sort of that way. But I I certainly embody that desire, like you said, of seeing this almost moral duty as a one to participate in those callings, whether it be in the public health sector where we're affecting the population level of people, or just at the patient level of getting to impact the person who's just sitting across from the table or the desk from us.
That's exactly why I think this is such a good Enneagram type for healthcare. Everything you just said. That being said, though, we'll start off with it's great because you're a student, so we can kind of hit both avenues here. As a student, what do you think has been the most beneficial thing about being an Enneagram One, and what maybe has been the most detrimental thing?
Hmm. So, the greatest strength in some ways is also the greatest weakness for ones. And it's that idealistic side. Because we're idealistic, I get to see and I get to anticipate that I can always be driven to improve everything that I see around me. That I look out and I see the best possible version of this patient. And I see the steps that it might take to get there. And so, in a way, it's a strength because I can be a great motivator. Like you said, we tend to be excellent public speakers and we want to motivate people to action. And so there's a strength in that because if someone doesn't believe in themselves, we might be what they need to come alongside them and give them that confidence that you can get better. You can return to doing the things that you love and engaging with the world in ways that are meaningful to you. But at the same time, that poses a bit of a weakness because, especially as a student, as I'm trying to come alongside patients that come into our clinics, there might be this idealistic, rose-colored picture that I have of what it means for them to be healthy, what wellness means for them, and what it means to improve their condition, which could be totally different from what it means to them. And so if we don't have the balance between our idealistic hopes and expectations with a bit of realistic conversation with them, saying that this is what I'm coming to you with, these are my biases, and these are the ways that I tend to approach therapy. If we don't help them to understand that from the beginning, it can set us up as clinicians to perhaps be frustrated over and over and over again when those expectations that we have for the patient aren't met.
I completely agree. And I'm going to be really honest. My number one flaw my first few years of practice was exactly that. You know, if I had a patient, I knew exactly what to give them, exactly what to recommend, exactly how to treat them. And everything was laid out. And then they either just refused to do any of my recommendations or they did the polar opposite. It would almost attack me. And as a healthcare provider, we can't let that bring us down because our job is to be there for that patient and do whatever it is that they need. And that's when I realized, I mean, it took me years. I think I've been in practice like 4.5 years at this point. It took me a few years to realize that I need to meet them where they're at because they're not all Enneagram ones. And I think the world would be probably awful if everybody was an Enneagram 1, but, but I finally realized, like, you know, if I recommend something and they do it 25% of the way, that's better than 0. And maybe they have goals of their own that maybe don't adapt completely to mine, or maybe I don't understand it. But if that makes them happy, that makes them happy. And I remember when that clicked in practice, I feel like it was like 2.5, 3 years in, I completely transformed the way that I molded my goals, like functional goals for patients and things like that. And I immediately had better patient outcomes. And so I think as an Enneagram 1, you're right. It was, it's great that we can feel this way about every single patient that walks through our door, but we need to reflect on who we are as people and be able to kind of tailor that to the individual, which is why I love personality tests, because everyone's so different.
Yeah, there's a sense in which your identity almost feels attacked if your recommendations aren't heeded.
Yes, and it's so silly. Like it could be the smallest thing, like my 65-year-old male patient who's a former, you know, who's a current veteran from like the Army or something. It could be something as simple as that patient never wanting to stretch. So every time they come in and I say, "Hey, how are your stretches going, Bob?" They're like, "Hey, you know, I'm not going to do those." And my heart would be crushed. And now I'm finally able to just kind of joke with them again, re-encourage them to do some, but then normally I'll modify, like, it's okay if you don't want to stretch for 20 minutes. How about you go on a 5-minute walk for me today?
Right.
And being okay and accepting that is good enough for them. And it has to be good enough for me in that moment too. It's so interesting. Yeah. So you obviously seem like you've done so much reflection as a student, which I'm really jealous of. I'm proud of you for doing that because it's going to put you ahead leaps and bounds in practice. Were you familiar with Enneagram testing before you and I talked originally about this podcast?
So before coming out to chiropractic school, I'd never heard of it. I had heard of your typical personality test, you know, the Myers-Briggs and the Big 5. And then there's 16 personalities. I don't know if you've taken that one. I like that one. They have all different little characters that line up sort of with the Myers-Briggs acronym grading system. So I'd taken all of those, but when I came out to Iowa, I was actually at one of my small groups at my church that I had first encountered it. So we were talking about it and people were saying, "Oh, I did this because I'm a 7. Like, what is this even? What is this? You guys are saying these numbers. And so that's when I had first heard about it when I first came out here roughly 3 years ago, 2.5 years. But prior to that, no, I hadn't. So it's definitely something that I'm still getting used to. And I was glad when you had asked me to do this because it made me dig a little bit deeper into the core personality of a 1. And then now there's these things called wings. And how does that enter into the mix of creating this almost dynamic personality that I feel that I embody? And this test does a great job of giving examples of where we might have certain strengths, might have weaknesses, how it might look for us to interact with other healthcare providers or even just people in general whether it be in relationships or
Everything.
just everyday life.
Everything. So you briefly mentioned wings. So as an Enneagram 1, you can obviously either be an Enneagram 1 wing 2 or a wing 9. Which wing are you?
I'm a wing 9.
Okay. So go ahead and touch on that a little bit. What have you learned about the wing 9?
Yeah. So I sort of try to go back to the original text that I could find. That naturally the one in me wanted to go back to what's the source document for
I love it.
I need to know the authors, what they wrote about each of these. So
Aww.
I would gone back to the original book that at least I could find. It was by Rizzo and Hudson in 1996.
Yes, that would be the one.
Yeah. So looking at the different characteristics that make up this wing 9 personality that's coupled with the 1, it seemed like one aspect of it was that it took the rigid structure nature of a 1 and it sort of made it a bit more adaptable, almost malleable.
Cool.
Where a characteristic that certainly exemplifies a 1 is embodying our principles, that we're teaching what we believe and we live out what we are saying to others. Yet the 9 kind of gives it more of a gentler, almost retiring approach. That when I encounter something, I have this idealistic hope and it doesn't come true because that's the world, that I don't have to feel attacked like we were talking about previously. I can sort of go with the flow a bit more. Having that wing 9 personality gives me a bit of that adaptability.
That's really cool. I did not know that about wing 9s, actually. I'm a 1 wing 2.
Okay.
So ironically, it's so perfect that you're on this first episode because we're so similar and then we have different wings. It's great. So Enneagram 2 is the helper. So that wing kind of, it enables me to take the parts of Enneagram 1 and focus on others instead of myself quite as much. But as you know, when you're a strict Enneagram 1, when you focus on others, it tends to be a little bit more judgy or almost analytical of their personality types. But with this wing 2, you become extremely based on people pleasing and extremely based on obviously helping individuals and using your strengths to do so. So I think that my wing is probably what benefits me in practice the most. Like I just have a core desire to solve all of the problems, which is obviously a blessing and a curse, just like everything else we've been talking about. But I personally love that. I think the vast majority of the time in healthcare, it's been really beneficial. I think hugely. Do you think that there's anything you've learned while looking up Enneagram information that almost gets you excited to use in the future in practice? Something that might help you with patients directly?
Yeah, along with the 1 wing 9 characteristics of being more adaptively rigid, something else that I had encountered was the core 1 is, like you said, this reformer that constantly sees how we can be improving things. But the 9 is a bit more introverted and wants to avoid conflict. And so there's a seemingly dichotomous situation there where we have someone who wants to make change and also at the same time someone who doesn't really want to step on anyone's toes along the way. So even just learning that helped me a bit in understanding more about who I am and then how I can interact with others, because I'm not someone who will aggressively go at someone else if they have a different viewpoint. Or if I'm sitting in class and I try to stay up to date on all the most current literature and guidelines, and if something's being talked about that just doesn't seem quite in alignment with that, in my mind, my idealistic mind, I see myself standing up in the middle of the classroom and being able to lay down a stack of papers with references, right?
Yeah. Well, you have a wife now, though. So if you ever have a day in practice where you're like, oh my goodness, this happened and it was awful, so unorganized, and I wanted to do this. Now you can just unleash everything on your wife. That's what I do to my husband.
my own counselor, right?
Yes, it's so true. Or like if something just like goes haphazardly wrong with a patient, I'm like, look what happened. This is what I wanted to do and I didn't because I couldn't. So yeah, having a spouse is so helpful with, well, I mean, probably for all personality types, but definitely when you're like, I wanted to do this, but I couldn't.
Right.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, that'll be, I think those are great skills to have in a workplace too. You know, being able to initiate change, but also being able to come together with other people and recognize everyone's opinions and not, you know, step on anyone's toes. I think that's going to be really nifty down the road.
Yeah, and I've gotten to experience that in a little bit of a sort of microcosm. So I work while going to school full time. I work part time as a senior pharmacy tech at Walgreens.
That's great.
Yeah, so I've been doing that for almost 4 years now. I did it
Nice.
right out of high school, and it's been awesome being in the environment because it's given me access to dip my toes into that medical arena
Yeah.
without burdening the responsibility of being a phishician yet.
Yeah.
I've had to
Yes.
talk with physicians. I've had to talk with customers when they come in and insurance companies. So I've started to learn the lingo and
That's great.
yeah, it's been amazing. It's been a great opportunity, especially being in chiropractic school and being able to almost balance it with that pharmacy side
Yeah.
has given me what I believe is a really healthy viewpoint when I'm approaching a patient and they say that they're on all of these medications and that they feel stuck or that they just don't really know where to go, that my personality is one that might tend towards more of that holistic side, but working in the pharmacy has given me the opportunity to truly understand when those medications are extremely valuable to these people. And it's given them a livelihood that they probably couldn't have without it. It's given them longevity and time with their kids. And so being in that environment has helped me to begin to interact with customers in the way that I might interact with patients, and even using some motivational interviewing tactics, which has been interesting.
That's great.
Yeah, so it's been a great experience, and I've certainly gotten heads turned when I tell them that I go to the chiropractic school down, and the look in their eyes is like, wait.
It's so funny. It's
Yeah.
so funny because, you know, you and I are very similar in the sense where we completely understand how the world of medicine and the world of chiropractic come together. And I wish everyone else could see how perfectly they intertwine. I really wish everyone could, because just like you said, there's a time and a place for everything. I truly think if you're on either end of the spectrum all the way, you're doing the world a disservice. I really do. That background in pharmacy is going to be so monumental for you. I'm so glad you're doing that. Do you have any stories either from clinic or the pharmacy where maybe you had a patient interaction or a physician interaction and your personality traits helped you win out in that situation, or even on the flip side, maybe a negative situation?
Yeah. So being in the pharmacy and being one, I had this strong sense of wanting to advocate for the person in front of me. And that's gotten to play out with insurance companies when patients have to jump loophole through loophole in order to get a medication covered by their insurance. So I've gotten the opportunity time and time again to get to kind of go to bat with these patients, and even just taking time to go and sit in our little waiting area and call the insurance with them and talk with them, and even be there to help them understand, well, what's a deductible and what's this copay and why was my insurance covering everything. That I got in this thing called a donut hole where they're not covering things now, but they're going to cover it again. And being able to advocate for patients in that way has been an experience that has allowed me to work out sort of those one tendencies or those characteristics of wanting to advocate for patients. And being in clinic, I've just started. So the way our curriculum works is in seventh trimester, because there's 10 trimesters of the whole program. Seventh trimester is when you start to see patients. So I've only started to get my feet wet, and I've been blessed to have interacted with a myriad of different doctors whether it's in chiropractic or outside of it along this way. So feel like I have a good foundation going into this in terms of patient communication and goal setting. And like you had said, more of the functional side of helping patients to return to those things that they want, not maybe even what I want. So being in clinic, I haven't gotten a ton of experience yet of getting to play these things out outside of getting to do it with students, because in the first half of the trimester that I'm in, most of our patients are our peers. And so it's more of your typical wellness patient where they're coming in for continual care. And that's though given me the opportunity to maybe ask someone about, what are your habits? What are those things that you're doing when you're not here, maybe when you're in class or when you go home for the day, that could be contributing to why it does seem like you keep coming back here? Because I didn't grow up in chiropractic, which is a bit of a unique story. It seems like there's one of two tropes when you go to chiropractic school. It's either your father's grandfather, the past 17 generations have been chiropractors.
Yep.
Or you've had some miraculous story with chiropractic. And I had neither of those. So I felt like a bit of an outsider coming into it.
Sure.
But that also has afforded me a bit of a unique perspective when I am interacting with patients, that I can maybe come at it at a different way than some of my other classmates might, or even peers that are in the same curriculum. I might see things just a little bit differently. So being a one in that, I can still have that bit of a reforming, almost antagonistic type, but it's also, let's try and strike that balance as best I can.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited for what's about to come for you. I think, again, like I mentioned at the beginning part of this podcast episode, I think being an Enneagram 1 definitely has a lot of perks when it comes to healthcare. And I think the first step that we should do is recognize maybe some of those detrimental characteristics as well. And it sounds like you already have a huge grasp on both parts of that. And I'm excited to see what you do in the future. Before we go, I would just love for you to give our listeners just one little last bit of advice, something that they can start to do now to prepare themselves for practice if they are an Enneagram 1 student, or even if they're already in practice and they know that they're this type of personality, whether they've taken the test or not. What can you give them just to say, hey, this is something that you can do right now to help better understand who you are with this personality type?
Yeah. So ones are characterized by that desire to pursue that which we deem as right or as correct, let's say. And so for individuals that are ones, I've attempted to balance that by trying to cultivate a spirit of curiosity when I'm interacting with patients or just with people in general, that I'm not the only expert in the room. Let's say if I'm in a clinical setting, that the patient, they understand their body, their conditions, even their values way more than I can. And if I'm coming at this interaction with this sort of one-sided hierarchical power struggle, that I'm the one who's giving them information, correcting them, then it doesn't give this space for them to give insight into myself and into my explanations and even into my understanding of what low back pain looks like for patients, or neck pain as it pertains to what they struggle with. So attempting to cultivate that spirit of curiosity in tandem with really trying to listen well. And there's this book that I read called The Lost Art of Listening. It was by Nichols and Strauss, I think was the researchers' names. And that book helped to open my eyes that listening is something that every one of us does on a daily basis, but it's not something that a lot of us take the time to get good at. Because there's a sense in which listening and just being present are totally different things. Because I can be present in front of someone, blank face, glassy eye, ears might as well be covered by headphones because I'm not really listening to anything that they're saying. But sitting down and having that sense of curiosity where I'm going to leave this interaction, if nothing else, learning a little bit more about this person's story, their narrative, what brings them here to me today. Whether I never see them again, this might be one little nugget within their day that can be a blessing to them that can be a blessing to me because I get to hear someone's story, and our stories are sacred. I mean, they're really holy ground. Our stories that we come into medical offices with, because some individuals have been struggling with conditions their entire life.
Yeah.
It's an autoimmune condition or a chronic condition. It's something that in one sense has formed into a bit of their identity. And it can even be scary if we start to chip into that chronic pain and they start feeling better. If part of their identity is sort of built around, I've struggled with this for the past 20 years. I've had to wake up and order my day in this way. Now I don't. That might be a little bit fearful for someone. And so being able to have that curiosity allows us to, as ones, balance these idealistic expectations and my rationality of, well, clearly A equals B. And so you aren't doing A, so that's why you're not getting B. If you just change A, you're going to get B.
So simple.
So simple, right?
I love that. Wow. That was phenomenal. I hope every single Enneagram 1 listening right now has learned so much. Sam, you were absolutely incredible. And we're so grateful that we had you on for today's episode. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Provider's Report. We hope you found today's episode valuable and inspiring. To stay updated with our latest episodes, subscribe to our podcast wherever you like to listen. For more resources and continuing education opportunities, visit our website. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of our patients and truly set a standard for value-based healthcare.